All right. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you everybody's attention. Appreciate it. Thank you. So this morning session, the comparative ethics for the planning profession, we are doing it in a hybrid format. Ethics credit, this says eligible for 1 AICP ethics credits, which are hard to come by. So we decided to do this in a hybrid fashion so people that aren't here could also get their AICP ethics credit. With that in mind, this is a message to both the in-room audience, but also the virtual audience listening to me right now, that this setup is extremely complicated. We're planners, not show people. And Sharon's a show person. But I really want to thank Sharon Suarez. She stepped up to organize this with very little notice. And we do have an hour and a half time. There may be some moments, 5 minutes here or there, where we're trying to figure out the technology, because we're live streaming a video of a skit we'll be doing later. But we're also doing poll everywhere activities, which I hope work. We'll see. And we have the virtual audience that can chat. The virtual audience is not going to be able to speak, but we're going to be doing breakout groups as well. So we'll be doing breakout groups in the room, but then we're also going to be doing Zoom breakout groups. The complications just pile up on top of each other, but we're going to do our best. And I just appreciate everybody's patience as we try to figure this out. We'll learn a lot from it, but hopefully, and we'll get through it together as a team. And so I'm going to turn this over to Sharon. I'm going to be monitoring the computer for a little while. I'm hoping that the virtual audience heard me say all this, but I'll double check when I get back to my chat. There might be a lot of people saying, "What's happening? What's happening? I don't hear anything." But here you go, Sharon.
All right. I'm wired. Okay, now the virtual audience won't see me, but you'll hear me. Welcome to the ethics session. We're going to have, as Joe told you, Joe, I'm going to say next when I'd like you to move a slide. Okay. All right. It's comparative ethics for planning commissioners and for planners, for the planning profession. A lot of us work with what I call allied professionals. We assume we know what they're supposed to do. And a lot of times we appear before our planning commissions and other bodies with our credentials, and nobody really knows what that means. There are some, I'm sure, that think it's just a way of building our resume. But today we're going to talk about the real reason for those credentials, those initialisms, and what they signify, and how our allied professions are different in their code of ethics, even. Their responsibilities and their accountability are different than ours as planners. And we'll talk about some of the implications that has for how we build our teams and what's reasonable to expect. All right, so as you can see, we're going to have a discussion of professional ethics. I want you to, if one of the goals is for you to understand from this point on what to look for when you see somebody say, "Here's a code of ethics." What there are standard component parts. You will know what to look for, and you will know where to find certain kinds of information in any code of ethics you see. We'll have a breakout session for that. We'll then perform an ethics skit, and we'll discuss it. And then after, if we have any more time, we'll do some standard question Q&A. Next. All right, so our first thing is the discussion of our professional ethics. Why are they important, right? What the basic components are, and what those codes really tell us. Next. It didn't, okay. I can see that you can see the poll everywhere thing, but the QR code's not coming up. Is there what? You want me to go to the next slide? Yeah, let's go to the next slide. All right. One of the questions I have is, what can just shout out what you think of, 1 or 2 words when you hear the term ethics. What does it mean to you? Say it loud. Fairness, integrity, Honesty. No sins of omission. Yeah. What about accountability? Whose accountability? Our accountability as a profession and individually, right? Okay, let's take a look. Next. A code of ethics is a bonding, a joining, an association, not based on blood, not based on proximity, not based on religion, not based on your family. We know history abounds with stories of feuds from clans and families who fought for generations over honor, right? But a professional society we aren't bound by that. Professional societies are a direct outcome of, pardon me, I'm getting feedback. I apologize. Let me move this. My voice is loud enough that I really don't need to have the microphone right up there. All right. The whole move toward professional societies is absolutely linked to urbanization and industrialization, things that got us away from those environs that were linked to family and were linked to friends and were linked to proximity. Instead, we became linked based on a common work goal or a common training or background needed or a skill. Next. So our codes of ethics they identify common interest areas. They identify, it's like a big sandbox for grown-ups. We identify the rules by which we want to play in the playground, what we're going to consider behavior that we will accept, what to do if somebody breaks those rules, and how we will figure out whether or not the complaints or the violations were fair and honest, and ideally give a way to appeal those and adjudicate them. Next. So this I'm going to read because this can be good on this side. In any organization that's a society or professional thing, they'll have rules of conduct. That's one of three parts, and in that regulatory part, in most codes of ethics will also be a part that deals with adjudication of a complaint, how you take a complaint, how to make a complaint, how to investigate it, how to report it, and then what the disciplinary actions are for it. Not all codes of ethics really go into that, but it's not because it doesn't belong there. It's just because it's either related to the profession, maybe it's highly regulated by law for health and safety, and perhaps they think it's not necessary. But most codes of ethics will have a good regulatory section, and they will, if they have an ethical code, they ought to let their members know how to report an ethical violation, who to report it to, how to adjudicate it, and what the punishment might be. Next. Next. Okay, so now is the breakout session. I'd like you to self-group into about 6 groups. We have an AICP code of ethics and an ethical code from one of our allied professions. Next. Now, I'll come back to the screen, Joe. We're going to come back to the screen in just a moment. These barcodes are for those in the watching us virtually, will take you to any of these ethical codes. So once we go through what the assignment's going to be, I'll come back and there'll be more time to find one, pick one that you want to be involved with. We're going to compare the AICP code of ethics with the Architects Code of Ethics, the AIA, American Institute of Architecture, the ASLA. Somebody know who that is? Tell me. Yes, you do. The Society of Landscape Architects, American Society of Landscape Architects. Our parents really as planners started first. Maryland Public Ethics Law. Every government and jurisdiction in the state of Maryland adopts or tries to be at least substantially equivalent to the public ethics law. That's where we get concerns. And if you're a planning commissioner or you've served as one or you're serving one, there's at least a concern about ex parte, Open Meetings Act, which is government in the sunshine, and conflict of interest. Those things come from the Maryland Public Ethics Law. The Bar Association. We all work with attorneys. And I just picked two that are similar. It's of all the codes of ethics you will ever dig into, I don't know where it ends, you know. So I picked two sections that are appropriate for this. PEs, engineers, they run the world. How many are engineers in here? There you go. Most of us work for an engineer. Most of us in public service work for an engineer as our boss, our big boss. Surveyors, we work with them. A lot of them are now managing projects that come before us. You'll get it now. As I say this, one of the goals is for you to see what what their code of ethics says, because sometimes as planners we feel like they're not quite getting what we do, right? And I'm sure they've never. So that's one of the goals of this brief exercise. Next. When you're looking through these, look for a statement of primary obligation. Now there'll be the next slide has the actual assignment, because this is like the hints for the assignment. Look for a phrase. Sometimes it's actually called that, a statement of primary obligation. And then evaluate whether or not there's an aspirational section, an educational section. Sometimes it's called the rules of conduct, and it'll give you an idea about what the conduct should be. Then the regulatory, what constitutes a violation? Who do you report a breach of ethics to? What form the complaint should take? Some will allow verbal, some require written. If it says it have to be faxed, we know we're dealing with a code of ethics. It probably has not been updated for a while. And then there will be a description of disciplinary actions, what the punishment might be, and take a note of what that punishment might look like. Next. This is the assignment. So please review them and then basically type them, right? This is a typology. So basically type them if you can. Speculate as to why for that profession, they might be one or predominantly one or the other of those types. Ask whether or not the ethical codes convey what each profession makes, what makes each profession unique. Do the codes specify who the professional ethics officer is?
For those in the virtual audience, I just want to let you know that Joe will get back to you. If you have access to a QR code and see these different ethics codes, there's this is not a linkable or a clickable display at this point. I encourage you to take a look at some of the different ethics ones I'm going to put into the chat, the links along the way, and encourage you to take a look at some of the other agencies that, or the other organizations' ethics codes. Thank you. Just for the audience, I was not, I'm sending out notices to folks, but I was not speaking. To be honest, I want to make sure that there is a microphone that or a speaker in the audience, and so I've been sending my chats out to you folks to communicate with me online, because I will be probably broadcast to the locals as well. So at this point, I'm going to be on mute, but encouraging you at the same time to convey and communicate your thoughts about these ethics classes. And we will again be hearing back from Sharon Suarez and Joe Griffiths in the future, in a few minutes after their breakout groups. And I will let you know if there was another problem regarding any Zoom crash.
Up. So to my right here at the top, we have the attorneys, Maryland Bar. All right, everyone.
Attention.
Attention.
Okay, we're doing the report outs now.
Yes, we're doing our report outs. We're online now. Let's listen to what the teams found. The first one to report out will be the team that analyzed the AICP code and compared it against the Maryland Bar Codes of Ethics. Who's speaking for you today? Roxanne Hemphill. All right, Roxanne.
Okay, well,
Is it on? Yeah.
It's on.
all righty. So we were comparing the Maryland Bar Association with the AICP. So I'm going to start with the Bar Association. We don't have the entire thing. We just have part of it. So the part that we have just has many different rules and regulations. It comments on those regulations, and then we do have a section about professionalism, and they self-report. And I don't have in here where they self-report to. I'm assuming it's a committee in the Bar Association that they self-report to. And we didn't get as far as what obviously the violation is determined whether they continue to practice or not. Probably the most the worst part of the violation. Who makes that formal decision? It doesn't really say in here because we don't have the whole thing. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, of course. So on the AICP one, however, yes, I would say that the AICP we talked about was more educational than anything else. Does it emphasize one function over others? I don't think so. We just got started on that when we had to stop. It does say that they do have a reporting officer. They have a professional ethics officer that complaints are given to. After all of the complaint is in and all of the evidence, I guess you could say, about that complaint has been reviewed, it is the ethics officer who makes the final decision. We didn't get to the point where what the worst punishment for the ethics violation was. We were just in the middle of that. But that's what we got.
Thank you so much, Roxanne. And let's go to the second one, the second group. Just
I think it's
tell us your name and the profession other than planning that you reviewed.
All right, I'm Jen Rohr, and we looked at the ASLA Code of Professional Ethics for Landscape Architecture. I guess one of the main things I just noticed when we first got the 2 hard copies was the AICP Code of Ethics was pretty thick and the ASLA one was pretty thin. Now they all they both go over the same general information. They have the responsibility, the regulatory part. I forget what the middle was. Yes, aspirational. But in general, I think what we came to is that the planning one seems to be more aspirational and educational, while the landscape one is maybe more just towards regulatory and kind of bare bones. They're, focused on the land and landscaping and what their particular job or career is, whereas planning just seems so much more diverse and social, and like we as planners have a responsibility to share and educate the public, and that we're really held to a pretty high standard, I think. And so, and getting into the regulatory part kind of seems like, well, then that might actually open us up to more ethical violations per se, if there's more that we're responsible for. So, we just started talking about differences in what we think planners are responsible for, which seems to be a lot. Yeah. Which one are you doing? Yes. Oh, to appeal. Now this, okay, ASLA has the executive committee for complaints. I was gonna say, I know planning does as well. I know that there's a
Number 6, there is
process.
a process.
Okay.
Um,
So they're both the same in that way. They both have processes.
Anyone can form the complaint,
Okay.
and so everything is handled by the executive.
Anybody can. So for planning, I don't know if anybody can file a complaint or if it's okay. Because I would assume that probably somebody from the public could file a complaint. Yeah. Okay. For the landscape.
Thank you so much. That was good. Thank you. Let's give them a big hand. All right, let's go down again. Tell us the next group. I know there's who had okay.
Okay, my name is Kate Charbonneau. Our group was reviewing the Maryland Public Ethics Law. I think probably, so ours is fairly regulatory. It's based on the state public ethics law, so it lays out everything based on that law in a very sort of regulatory fashion. As far as its purpose, it's really to assure that officials and employees, including state employees, avoid improper influence or even the appearance of that influence. So it kind of goes through and, it really governs, those categories of state officials and employees who are making decisions that affect citizens of Maryland. As far as, which I think is a bit more specific than obviously the AICP has been covered. It gives a process for disclosure by state employees, so ensuring that that information is tracked. It's available online, and any person can go look up those reports. And any person can also file a complaint to the State Ethics Commission if you feel like there's been a violation of that code. And then the State Ethics Commission does that investigation, and they can either determine no violation occurred, or if they do determine it's occurred, they have various actions they can take, including ceasing and desisting, issuing a reprimand, removal, fines, etc. So that's kind of how that one's laid out. It's very specific and as I said, regulatory. So
Thank you so much. might be, and while you're finding the next, getting the microphone to our next team, to those who just reviewed the Maryland Public Ethics Law, do you see a similarity between that code and local government rules of ethics or regular like rules of procedure? Did you notice that most of that has been sort of brought down to the local level in some form or fashion?
Well, I think one of our they file not annually, but they provide updates quarterly on. So yeah.
Yeah, my name's Ben Tillman. I'm with the Queen Anne County Planning Commission. And we looked at the engineer's code of ethics, and it's pretty flowery and a lot of aspirational stuff with some educational, but no regulatory discussions in it that we could find. And this seems to be inconsistent with the code that we have here, our AICP code. I think the difficulty is that if you have all these aspirational goals, but no way of enforcing them, there's not particularly much you can do if there's a violation. The other part of it that I think we talked about a little bit is who are the engineers actually working for? And they are working for clients. They're not working for the state or county. In this case, we're presuming that they're before us as a board. The thing that I find interesting, and I admit I didn't discuss this with the group, is that I used to be on the Ethics Commission in Queen Anne County. And it's, as this former group discussed, a lot narrower and more focused in its intent, largely in looking at financial transactions as they apply to certain awards of contracts and things of that nature. So this ethics to me is more philosophical, a little bit more difficult to pin down, and kind of an interesting exercise. Does anybody in the group want to add anything, or have I said it well enough?
The engineers, the flower?
Yes. But that may not be a good choice of words. What I'm saying is it's more philosophical. It's less specific. We're not talking about ohms and volts here. They're talking about concepts. And I would have thought as engineers, maybe they'd tighten their focus down a little bit, but maybe it wasn't written by an engineer. I'm not sure.
Well, thank you very much. That's very interesting. And our next, we have at least one more.
No, two more.
Two more. Okay.
Oh, just
And then there's one up at the top. So there are two more.
somebody.
Okay, I'm Tamara Blake Wallace, Calvert County Planning Commission Administrator. We examined the Board of Professional Land Surveyors, their final regulations. And basically we found out that they're more regulatory than the AICP. They're more specific to the actual practice of land surveying. And it's very specific to them, but most of their regulations on how to file ethics and things of that nature are found more at the Department of Labor and Licensing regulations. So it's not really spelled out in their code. The one difference that we found where the AICP spells out the process, this one does not. It also goes back to their code with the licensing. And it doesn't spell out in their code who makes the final decisions like the AICP. The one thing that we did find different, a little bit unique, was that land surveyors can actually lose their license, which actually stops their practice. While AICP, you can lose your certification, but you can still work. So those were some of the differences that we found.
Thank you so much. That's excellent analysis. All right, we have one more at this table. I believe this is the architects. Bye.
Yes, thank you. Despite what it says on my chest, my name's Joel Rensberger. I'm from Frederick County Planning Commission. We had the AIA, the architects, and we compared the aspirations of the AICP with what are called the canons at the for the architects. Both shared a continuing education requirement. Both had an element of the public interest. Both encouraged a type of unbiased professionalism. Both encouraged a form of mutual respect. We identified two differences. The architects have a mandate for sustainability and energy consciousness. Shockingly, the planners don't. The AICP has a stated equity and diversity and inclusion aspiration. The architects don't. So I think for our group, we've identified two areas of improvement, one for each group of professionals. Thank you.
And Joe, I'm going to turn that over to you to turn over to Chuck, who's monitoring responses from our virtual participants. I want to thank you all. Stay tuned because we have some questions and general observations at the end of this.
So the virtual audience did the same activity, did some comparisons, and while we can't hear them speak, well, we can hear Chuck, who's a panelist. There he is. Those who are here in the Planning Commissioner training course on Tuesday might remember Chuck, who's an instructor, but Chuck's going to report out on what the virtual audience said.
Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me. The AIA, I'm going to read through some of the quick chats that were given. We asked each one to look at one or more of the different organizational ethics codes and indicate any differences or observations. So one comment was AIA mentions a public interest, but not as a rule in which a violation is grounds for a disciplinary action. Interestingly, it says, looks like AIA code prohibits one from designing a jail. Another comment says, I see a lot of similarities between the AICP code and the professional engineering code. Yes, there's similarities between AIA and the AICP. AICP is more to the point, while AICP is more flowery and does not seem as much regulatory. So those are some of the observations from the virtual audience. And again, thank you very much. And my fingers are crossed that we will continue to have Zoom work and not crash again on us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Now, before we go on, let me ask you this. Do you think that these are allied professionals, as I'm calling them, because we often work together. And of course, to do the Maryland Bar Association credit, this is just a small portion. What we reviewed was just the aspirational portion and the regulatory portion. But they have a tremendous body of work on ethics. And that same link will get you to the general area. But that said, did you have any idea that our allied professions had as significant a body of ethical work as they obviously do have? Was anybody surprised or at least comforted to know that they really do deal with ethics? All right. The reason I'm asking is, do you think most of the planning commissioners and our mayors and boards that we appear in front of are aware of all the ethical codes we deal with? You see what I'm saying? This is really important. When we appear to our lawmakers, we represent our professional organizations. We follow our codes of ethics. So do those members of our allied professions. When we see somebody with a PE or an AICP or an RLA behind their name, or a registered land surveyor or a registered line surveyor, or an Esquire or some other designation for attorney, We are dealing with people with professions that have committed to follow a code of ethics. And for most of them, especially for AICPs, anyone can report a violation, and our credentials alert them that we have promised to follow our code of ethics. It's not bragging rights. It is accountability. When I put that beside my name, I'm letting anybody know who's out there. You could, you hold me to that standard. You hold me to that code of ethics because I've pledged to uphold it. Same way with a PE or a surveyor or a landscape architect, and certainly for a member of the bar.
Thank you, Sharon. One question this wasn't in our agenda, but I'm going to ask it anyway, if that's okay. Today this is a very interesting group of people at this conference, right? You have professional planners that are AICP. We also mostly are planning commissioners. Now, while planning commissioners, we haven't compared the any planning commissioner code of ethics because such a thing doesn't exist. We did both of the sessions on Tuesday addressed the ethics of planning commission in some form. So either the planning commissioner training course, I know Adam Snyder talked about ethics, and I believe I haven't taken the Open Meetings Act training in a while, but I do believe it also at least touches on ex parte communication and a little bit ethical consideration. So I'd be interested to hear from a planning commissioner in here who is at one of those courses on Tuesday, if they see a comparison between what any of the code of ethics they've reviewed today, maybe particularly AICP, and what they learned in that class, or a distinction.
And remember, the Maryland the public ethics law for Maryland
It's true.
is
does
where
apply.
a lot of that
That's
comes
true.
from, right? So did you recognize your rules of procedure as planning commissioners? Did you recognize that code, that law, when that team was reporting out? That's
Hold on.
I wasn't at the class. I have taken the class, but when they first started talking about it, yes, I noticed it. Oh, there it is, right there.
so. I'd like to also point out that this is really important for planning commissioners to understand that the people who appear before them really are committed to their profession. They do, most of us in all these professions are required to take continuing education. That's part of our commitment. So if you're staff or whether you're working with the private sector development team, when they appear before you and they say, yes, in my best professional judgment, this is when those codes of ethics really come into play. So it's not just a nice kid or a nice, who's a young planner, just got their AICP, they come before you and you just want to sort of think of them as just an ordinary person. They have committed to following the code of ethics, and they have committed to continuing their professional status by taking ongoing credits, and including and specifically in ethics and in law. So just keep that in mind. This is your professional staff. And when you say professional staff, it's not just that they're getting paid. It's that they are members of various professions that help you make your decisions. All right. Would you please change the slide? And go ahead and go forward. We had a few questions. I'm going to ask just for show of hands because I know what my questions were. So how many thought the AICP Code of Ethics was more regulatory? Just raise your hand. Was it primarily aspirational? How many? Just show of hands when I raise this. Quite a few of you thought, yeah. Okay, how many thought it was more disciplinary, dealing more with the violations and that? I will tell you that in the old days, i.e. before 2021, dealing with the codes of ethics changes that went before it, the AICP code was primarily, in my opinion, aspirational. We did aspire to a profession that was inclusive, that did commit to including the public and in all of our decisions and into a process of ongoing public debate. We're committed to that. So a lot of planners, you'll see, if you want to get a profession that knows how to workshop an idea, to come up with a plan, to communicate with citizens, to figure out ways to get to the neighborhoods and get to the civics. A planner is one of your best professions to go to. That's one of our committed realms of professionalism. We're trained on that. So not to say that engineers can't do it, or that landscape architects can't do it, or that lawyers can't do it, or anybody. I'm just saying, you want a bridge built, you may want to go to an engineer first. You want a community outreach plan done, you may want to consider going to a planner. So, oh, there it is. Let's see if this works. Let's go to the next one. Let's see if it works. If you can see the barcode, if it comes up. Okay, we'll just try this. But I've already answered the question. We've already talked about it. So let's go on. All right, so there were some word cloud things. It is what it is, right? All right, so if anybody got their AICP, how many AICPs are in here now today? Oh, quite a few of us. How many got their AICP since 2021? All right, then you, like me, have work to do, because the AICP Code of Ethics was updated in 2021. Actually, the process was longer than that. It took maybe a couple of years. It was adopted and went into effect in January of 2022. The comparison of the code when I became an AICP and the code today is an order of magnitude. It is so much. There's so much more specificity in the regulations, the kinds of things that cause violations. The aspirational section, in my opinion, has been squished just a bit down, even though it's still very aspirational. But for all of you, for all of us who got our AICPs prior to 2021, take a look at that code. Go to just read it, just read through it. Now, there is a person, it used to be Paul Farmer. How many remember Paul Farmer? Paul used to be the ethics officer and head of AICP, and that's who you call if you had a question. And there was now there's a specific person, not the head of AICP, whose job it is to deal with ethical complaints. You no longer fax a complaint. There's a certain procedure for submitting a complaint. In order to keep down false claims, only AICPs can make certain requests for adjudication. But the team that mentioned, several of them mentioned, we could lose our credential. Doesn't mean we can't be a planner. That's absolutely correct. You can still work if somebody will hire you. Depends on the violation. There is a difference between ethical violations and legal violations. So there is now a requirement, a very clear requirement, so that we're not promoting our problems to other jurisdiction. If somebody runs afoul of the law, they must self-report, or other people can report them, because we want to, not that they can't ever work, but we need to keep track of this. A lot of times people would get into trouble. I'm not saying it was just, this is anywhere. And we would end up just not bringing it, not talking about it, and letting them go, find their own way somewhere else. So we're trying to correct that. But I suggest everybody read through that. Anybody can report an ethical violation. It is looked into. A lot of it is disqualified, never makes it to the realm of ethical complaints. There's a lot more metrics on our ethical reporting. If you go to the APA website and look up ethics, you'll now see some really good metrics on the nature of the ethical complaints that were made in the previous year. If it became a formal ethical complaint, you'll see who, and you will see what the nature of it was and how it was adjudicated. They're taking the credential, of course, can result in a complaint, a violation in and of itself. There is one that has persisted, one complaint that's persisted over the years with a gal who was an FAICP, ran afoul of the ethics code and was told not to use her FAICP. It was taken back. She continued to use it on LinkedIn. So it was off her other social media, but somebody did report that was still on her LinkedIn page, and she was told again, you cannot use that. But how do you enforce that, right? So LinkedIn didn't care about it, so it's still up on LinkedIn. But those kinds of things, that's ethics. Converting public sector funds for your own personal use is conversion. That's a crime. That's called fraud. So knowing where that line is, while our personal chapter president and a professional development officer are good to talk to, do you think that they are the ones who determine an ethical violation? No, no. Only the ethics officer and our ethics commission can do that. Let's move on. There are a lot of changes. That's just a summary of the changes. So it increased, these are some of the very important changes. It increased the categories of aspirational principles from 3 to 5. It increased the number of aspirational principles now to 35. So I say it squished it a bit because some of the general language has been replaced by a more structured approach. It's still there. It's still primarily aspiration. It's one of the biggest components of the 3, in my opinion. It improved the alignment of rules. It clarified the types of employment. We'll talk, there's some questions I have for that, but there are ways typically you can expect not to have a second job. But under certain circumstances, it can be allowed. We have some questions about that. Does anybody want to venture a guess on when that might be? When would it be okay to have a second job? Ever? No, if your employer says it's okay, you can do it. So the rule is you must let your employer know. You must keep your current employer in the loop. And one of the most recent violations of that particular ethical stipulation not to have a second job was done by someone during COVID who needed the extra money for the family, had a second job as a paid planner in another jurisdiction, but didn't tell either employer. So that was not okay. Had they cleared it with the employers, that might have worked out. Okay, let's see. Okay, here it is. It's now in the Code of Ethics stipulated that only an AICP member can file an appeal. They were just trying to figure out ways to keep frivolous complaints and frivolous activities down to a minimum. So they tightened that particular thing up. Next. So yes, I would say our Code of Ethics is stunningly aspirational. And this is our continuous open debate thing. This is what makes us different. And this is why a lot of our training is all about public process, and why planners, when you do a comp plan, are all about trying to figure out how to workshop that plan, how to get it out, how to build consensus. That's also the reason why planning commissioners are under such pressure to implement the plan. By the time the Planning Commission recommends it to the legislative board, the citizenry is excited. They want it. And so you will then be under pressure to implement the plan. If you don't know that going into your comp plan, and if you don't plan to implement, and Bill Butswood and I were having a good talk about that, you will be behind the 8 ball until you figure out how to change your code or implement a new code process like a form-based code. And that can take a year or two. And during that time, you're going to be highly pressured by the public, whose consensus you spent years building as you were developing your comp plan or your small area plan. So just keep that in mind. Next. Okay, I'm going to move on to this because we're sort of short on time, but all of this is in the new Code of Ethics. And if you go to the APA website and Google Mitch Silver, currently the president of AICP, he gives a marvelous summary of the changes to the new Code of Ethics. Very readable. Right, let's see, keep moving.
The next slide says break, and I recommend we forego the break, given that we have only about 20 minutes left.
Okay. All right, we're going to go right to the skit. Now, bear with us on this skit. That's the stage. That is the stage.
I need to set up the
I'm going,
camera.
yes, just, if you will go to the skit.
I did want to say that one person jokingly dated themselves in the chat by saying that they got their AICP in 1986 and they previously talked with Paul Farmer and that he was very helpful.
Wasn't he?
And then he
Oh.
joked how that he was dating himself.
Oh,
So-
no, that's cool. Paul Farmer was, didn't retire until recently. And he actually liked this, he took this same kind of breakout session on the road with him at once. I've done this at APA National. Paul took it to a new level and took that on the road because it's so important for everybody to understand there is a difference between planners and engineers, planners and landscape architects, planners and architects, etc. We have a role. Okay. This is is there a chance we can get to the title slide for the skit? Wait, okay. This particular skit is an adaptation from a 2017 skit done by the Delaware Planning Thespians, who back in 2006 or so started a process of doing skits to help people get ethics. And it's fun, and there is another dimension to learning. So I adapted that for this conference, and we have, let me get I'm the first narrator. Wait. Oh. Can you give me another script? Sorry, get one out of the box. There you go. All right. This is just going to stay up because the action's going to be there, and hopefully the action will show up on the video. Can we switch it so that the video is now on? Okay, Alan. There you go. Thank you. All right. Welcome to Delton. It's a small town within Terry County and has about 21,000 residents. It's long been an affluent bedroom community of a much larger town about 20 miles away, and it is home to many doctors, lawyers, and corporate executives from a large manufacturing plant. There's always been a small community of lower income households who are mostly Latino and African Americans near the downtown of Delton. The area surrounding Delton has many low-wage employers who provide employment for this low-income population, including entry-level jobs at the manufacturing plant and many service sector jobs that support the booming tourism industry in the ski resorts in that area. Terry's consolidated plan, which was developed as part of the county's development block grant program, includes a goal to provide more affordable housing, including housing to support low-income populations in Delton, which has historically been zoned for single-family residential development. 2 years ago, an old farmstead near Delton was rezoned for multifamily residential development. A developer who has developed many well-managed low-income apartments in other areas of nearby Terry City has acquired 7 acres of the old farmstead in Delton and has approached the county's community development office about developing the property using low-income housing tax credits, or as we call them, LIHTC, right? The property is located along the bus route that serves several employers and is one of the few properties zoned for apartment construction in Delton. From the perspective of Terry County's Community Development Officer, Gemma, this location is ideal for the proposed development. And as Act 1, Scene 1 opens, Gemma is making a phone call to Jerry. Gemma is with the county's development office, and Jerry is the planning director for the town of Delton.
Act 1 is problem. On the phone call.
You're on.
Ring, ring. Hello. Good morning, Jerry. This is Gemma over at the Terry County Community Development Office. How's everything going with you?
You know how it is in local government. Every day is a party.
Oh, yeah. I know what you mean. Listen, I need to talk to you about a project that's coming your way. A firm called Quality Housing LLC has been awarded low-income housing tax credits to build apartments on that old Smith property on Terry Highway. You may not realize it, but the tax credits come with some really tight time constraints. So I wanted to talk to you to see if you can work with them to meet their timelines.
Of course, we can try to work with the developer as best we can. I hope you realize that I can't guarantee anything. But that said, there shouldn't be a problem as long as the developer makes timely submissions and the plan meets the requirements of the zoning ordinance.
Great. Joe Putnam will be calling you to set up a meeting. If you hit any glitches during the process, please call me. This project is a priority in terms of meeting our goals for the countywide fair housing plan. All the CDBG projects in Terry County are linked to it, including, by the way, several of Delton's downtown rehabilitation efforts. There is a lot riding on this project, and I need to do what I can to help it along.
Well, thanks for letting me know. I will certainly keep you in the loop. If we run into any snags, I will let you know.
Thanks.
That's a wrap. Next scene.
After Gemma talked to Jerry, she made a courtesy, Mayor Jacobs made a courtesy call to her. Later that day, the mayor stopped by Jerry's office to talk privately.
Jerry, I got wind of a problem and I need you to help me squash it.
Of course, you know I'm your go-to gal.
Good. I hoped I could count on you. Anyway, you know that guy, Joe Putnam, who built all those housing projects over in Terry City? That joker thinks he's going to come into Delton and build projects here. And on the Smith property of all places, you need to squash it. It won't fit with the upscale houses in City Point. You know there's no way we can let those people move in next to Delton's nicest and most exclusive neighborhood.
Oh my. Well, Mayor Jacobs, that may be a tough one. The Smith property is zoned for apartments. So long as the project meets the requirements of the zoning ordinance, there really won't be any grounds for denial. And it may actually be a fair housing violation to deny it.
Jerry, I'm getting tired of your excuses. It seems like every time I want something done, you throw the code at me, telling me why it can't be done my way. That code is just a guideline. It's not the Bible. And you need to start using your judgment as to when to apply it strictly. If you want a future in Delton, that is. You know the Smith property was rezoned so that luxury apartments could be built, not tomorrow's slums. Your job is to protect our community character, and letting lazy people who are sponging off the government into Delton doesn't protect our community character. Now, does it?
That worked for me. Wrap it and go to the next scene.
Okay, it says kill the project.
Ah, good help. All right, now it's the problem, scene 3 of Act 1, Jerry's office at the Delton Planning Department. Several weeks later, Jerry meets with Joe Putnam, of Quality Housing LLC, to discuss the anticipated application and to go over Delton's site plan regulations and the review process. Joe Putnam knocks on Jerry's office door and then walks over to talk to Jerry.
Good afternoon, Jerry.
Good afternoon.
It's good to see you. Nice to meet you. I've heard good things about the work you're doing in Delton.
Well, thank you. It's nice to meet you too.
As I think Gemma told you, I'll be submitting a site plan application soon. I brought a layout of my proposal today just to let you see what I have in mind. It's similar to the Somerset in Terry City. I'm sure you've seen the write-up on it as a model community for low-income families. We make a point to create an environment where people can thrive, can move out of poverty. The community center has high-tech resources that allow residents to take classes online, earn their GED, enroll in other training programs. Our way of doing things is the future of housing to help people move up. And so far, our success has been great.
So your proposal sounds great. However, while it might work in Terry City, I'm not sure it will work in Delton. Our community is a little different, as I'm sure you understand.
Well, of course, I know your community is a little different. The town of Delton is the reason that Terry County is under scrutiny from HUD. For years, nothing in Delton was zoned for apartments, all high-end single-family homes. Nothing could be done until the Delton Town Council rezoned the old Smith property to allow apartments. That was 2 years ago. I bought the property shortly after it went into foreclosure. I saw it as a great opportunity to build some quality, affordable housing in an area the county's consolidated plan says it's needed. Anyway, Gemma told me you would be able to help me out with this. She said, did she talk to you?
Yes, she called me so that I could watch for your application. Well, let's go through the process so you can follow our submittal and review schedules and stay on track.
Okay, let's move on to Act 2.
Act 2, the dilemma, Scene 1. Scene 1 in the planning department, Jerry's request. Joe Putnam, a professional engineer and project manager with Quality Housing LLC, submitted the development application for a mixed-use multifamily community on the old Smith property. The application has the enthusiastic support of Terry County, the State Housing Office, and the Regional HUD Office. However, the mayor is still furious. The Planning Commission is not aware officially of the conundrum. Jerry decides to assign the application to Mike, an experienced planner who recently received his AICP.
Good morning, Mike. I have a new project for you. You are going to get to review the proposal for the Smith property. This is pretty political, so I will want to review your drafts along the way. And I know that the property is zoned for apartments, but we need to find some flaws in this. You know, give the planning commission something they can grab onto in case they want to deny it.
Is that fair? Aren't we supposed to review the project on how it stacks up against the zoning ordinance?
That may be what they teach you in planning school, but in real life, it can't always be that simple. I need you to find whatever flaws you can in this project.
Okay.
Take that into the next.
Act 2, Scene 2, the pressure builds. Mike could see that Jerry was under lots of pressure. He noticed that the mayor had been stopping Jerry's office frequently for several months. Each time the mayor left, Jerry seemed as if she was going to be sick. Meanwhile, Mike continued to lead the internal review of the affordable housing project. He couldn't find any significant flaws in the application. There were little issues that cropped up from time to time, but the applicant team worked to resolve them. The site plan looked very good. Mike did not think that Jerry would actually want him to bias his report against the project, so he decided to write his report objectively, just as he would do for any other project that met all the requirements. As the scene opens, Mike has just arrived at the office the morning after turning in his draft staff report for Jerry's review before the Planning Commission hearing. Jerry is at the door to her office and is waving Mike to come in.
Mike, come in here and sit down. I don't know what to say. This comes across as a glowing report. How on earth is the Planning Commission supposed to find flaws in this site plan application after they read this?
Gosh, Jerry, I'm surprised that you are surprised. I've told you over and over again that I think this project is outstanding. You've seen the earlier staff reviews. The site plan has been through multiple staff level reviews. I look for issues throughout the process, just as I would for any project. Our reviews reported all the issues that needed to be addressed, and the applicant addressed those issues with each resubmittal. As I told you on multiple occasions, the applicant has a really great project team of professional engineers, landscape architects, attorneys, historic preservationists, archaeologists, and on and on. It was an amazing team to work with. Any issues, or flaws as you put it, have been addressed, and I'm not going to make up flaws that don't exist. This application is as good as any I've ever seen. Frankly, the applicant paid very close attention to our code, and in many areas, this application far exceeds our requirements. This is going to be a quality community, and it will actually blend in well with the surroundings because of the terrific layout they did.
Mike, I hear what you're saying, but you really don't get it, do you? The mayor has made it clear that he does not want this affordable housing project to go forward, period. Bottom line, I thought I made it clear that the site plan had to fail, but instead you wrote a glowing report. If the planning commission reads it, there's no way they will deny the project, not even if all the NIMBYs show up. Mike, this report will cost me my job.
Look, Jerry, I thought we were past this. I kept you in the loop. I told you that I couldn't find any significant flaws. This report is based on the application I reviewed and on the applicant's response to the criticisms and suggestions Delton staff made throughout the review period. It's ready for the Planning Commission. I don't envy your position, but you need to understand mine. I need to make the best recommendations I can based on the objective review of the project. Of course, Jerry, you are the boss. If you want to change the report, of course you can do that. But if you change the report, please take my name off of it.
Yes, nice work. Let's bring this home.
Act 3, Scene 1. Mike talks to Gemma.
Mike decided he needed to talk to someone he could trust about the dilemma. Mike knew Gemma from graduate school. They'd become good friends and had stayed in touch over the years. That's right. His old grad school friend was Gemma. We met her earlier, remember? Gemma is the county's development officer. Mike knew Gemma was very knowledgeable and passionate about fair housing, so he thought maybe he would call her and get her thoughts. Plus, Gemma works for the county, not for the town of Delton, so there shouldn't be any conflict, right? Mike called Gemma, asked her to meet him for lunch at George's Bar and Grill. He wanted her thoughts about what he could do next. Even though his name wouldn't be on the report, he didn't feel right about his office trying to submarine a project that met all the code requirements, just because those people would live there. As the scene opens, Mike and Gemma are seated at a table.
Hey, Gemma, it's really good to see. Hey again, Gemma. It's really good to see you. It seems like it's been forever.
I know, work is crazy. And with the kids at home now, I just don't have much time to catch up with old friends. So fill me in. What do you want to talk about?
I need to ask you something off the record. I'm in a tight spot.
Shoot, I'll be glad to give you some advice. I gave some great advice. You gave me some great advice in grad school when I was ready to throw in the towel. So I owe you big time.
Yes, I do remember that, and I'm glad you stuck with it. Well, here's the deal. Quality Housing LLC submitted an application to develop the Smith property. You know, the old farm near City Point. You probably know that it received low-income housing tax credits. Anyway, Jerry asked me to find flaws in the application when I did my review. I told her I couldn't find any, and she was really mad. I think she's trying to sink the project to make the mayor happy. He doesn't want an affordable housing project near City Point. I'm not sure what to do. I did my report and turned it over to Jerry. I told her I won't change it, and if she decides to change the report, then I told her to take my name off of it. Look, I know she's been under a lot of pressure, but this is not right. Anyway, here I am, a new AICP and my boss's bad side, and on my boss's bad side, big time.
Are you kidding me? You need to know that I called Jerry about this project several months ago, and she assured me it would go smoothly as long as the applicant complied with Delton's zoning requirements and the application process. I also asked her to call me if there were any glitches. She promised she would. I haven't heard a peep from her. I assumed everything was moving right along. I am so upset right now. You guys can't deny that application. If this project is denied, the entire county CDBG funding will be jeopardized. If we lose our funding, lots of good things will not happen. You need to stop Jerry from changing the report. Go over her head, do something. I really don't want to have to file a fair housing complaint against the town of Delton.
I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that you and Jerry had talked. I can't go over Jerry's head. I know this is coming from the mayor. I guess I really put myself in the middle of this mess.
Great, I like that. One more thing, okay. Place them one. That's the. You're the class.
I'm supposed to walk in.
All right, Act 3, Scene 2. Mike talks to Jerry, pardon me. Jerry's at the computer. Mike walks in and sits down.
Jerry, we need to talk. I think you're making a big mistake if you change my report on the Smith property.
Mike, I guess you mean well, but you obviously don't understand the challenges of managing the department and trying to keep elected officials happy.
Jerry, please just hear me out. Look, I bet you take your professional ethics just as seriously as I do. And well, maybe it is understandable that the ethical lines get a little grayer and fuzzier the higher you go up in the organization. But Jerry, I'm worried that trying to sync this project really crosses the line. And I think that once you cross it, you won't be able to take it back. I think you'll regret it.
Okay, one. That's all right. And let you know if you need to reach this phone and tomorrow.
County Planning Commissioner, Carol Sepe. Joel Putnam played by Joel Remsberger. Frederick County, Chair of the Frederick County Planning Commission. Jerry, played by Cynthia Ungast, Planner, Town of Middletown. Kristen Humphrey, narrator 2. Thank you, Kristen. Alan Feinberg, clapper assistant and set assistant. And Kathy Mitchell, Gemma. Kathy is the attorney, one of the attorneys for the Frederick County, Maryland. And Mike, our hero, played by Joe Griffiths. Well, folks. Oh, Bill Butts, William Butts, the man who started it all. Didn't he do a fantastic job? He has that Southern gentleman, deep draw and a beautiful baritone speaking voice. It's just amazing. Thank you, Mr. Butts. All right, can we get the questions back on that? Did you enjoy that? Have any of you gone through something similar? I don't need to know the particulars, but we all know it happens, right? Unfortunately. All right, so until the application for the housing project was submitted, until that time, had anything happened that would run afoul from the code of ethics? If not, anybody see any ethical code violation up to that point? No, I'm seeing head shake. No, nothing was in play yet. It was speculation. We might have seen things or heard things that we didn't like, but there was no ethical code violation. All right, what about any of the other professionals? Did anyone in the skit in its entirety act unethically other than we had planners, we had public officials, we had the county CDBG community development officer. Did any of those 3 people or 3 players act unethically?
I'm Mark with the City of Aberdeen. I'm Mark with the City of Aberdeen Planning Commission. On the last scene, the county person claimed that they could not deny it because of they could jeopardize their funding. That to me would be unethical. I mean, that they're worrying about the money rather than does it fall into the guidelines of the zoning. So it's a gray area there, but I think that the when she says, you know, you're putting our county at risk of future funding, that's not the reason you would not deny it. I mean, that to me is a pretty gray area.
That's a good point. Now, if there's a twofold question in that, whether you realize or not. One is you're asking, could you deny something that had received a glowing report from staff? That's one question. The other question is there any law or anything else that might supersede that consideration from Gemma's standpoint? She is the county's community development officer, and that you do have federal funding involved. And what happens when you have federal funding? You have a commitment to the fair housing. So we'll get into that a little bit more. So there are two things involved in that. Laura, we have a.
I see possible legal issues with a public official, i.e. the mayor, pressuring a staff member to violate their ethical responsibilities to basically find a problem with the project that meets.
Yes. And would you tell the group your name?
Laura.
Laura Jaffe.
Yeah.
All right. Those are excellent. Carol Sepe. Say your name again and say.
Carol Sippy. I think that Jerry violated the code of ethics, our engineer's code of ethics.
All right, thank you. Just keep those in mind. So there are potential code of ethic violations already from the beginning. Once the people started talking, I do think they hit the nail on the head. The mayor, while there might be not be anything written down, I think there's something that needs to be addressed if a mayor or public official comes in and attempts to pressure the planning director. When Jerry's response, that's another issue. So at the beginning, it looks good though, right? She's not saying she'll do anything weird, but as she goes on and she puts the pressure on Mike, he's not even sure at the beginning. She might have just been saying what a lot of people say, you know, here, take it, find flaws with it, as if she's saying, do a really good job and find anything out you can. Doesn't necessarily mean fail it, but it became clearer and clearer toward the end that she wanted it failed. And then there is the initial observation by the mayor of Aberdeen, or the planning commissioner from Aberdeen, that says, can somebody actually threaten you with funds? Could you lose federal funding? And of course, if you're dealing with a fair housing, HUD federally financed project, and you're not furthering fair housing, you are in a dilemma. And remember, Delton was already under scrutiny because it had no multifamily housing zone, only single family. That will get HUD's attention in a heartbeat. Next. Let me ask you this. Assume Jerry's a member of AICP. Did she violate the code of ethics when she told Mike to find flaws in the application? Carol said yes. Does everybody agree with her? Raise your hand if you agree with her. I agree. Thank you. Did Mike violate any element of the code of ethics by accepting the assignment? Think about it. I don't think he did, but people could argue about it, right? They could argue about it. If he had been on the side of the fence that took his boss's direction to find flaws as a direction to actually sink the project, yes. If he took it to mean, oh, a challenge, you go back and see what you can do and make sure you've uncovered every flaw and then it's addressed. No. Now, the original, when this skit was aired at the planning at the online with the Delaware Thespians, they had a 5-panel of experts. And at the time, they interpreted it to be the former, that he had taken the direction to actually sink the project. Even though at the end, he turns out to be a good guy, initially, he may have been complicit, unknown, not being aware of that would be a real problem at the very beginning. So their feeling was we should be very alert at the beginning of a project if anything like that's going to be happening. So that's actually a gray area for me. I need to know a little bit more in real life about what's being told. I guess the question for those of us practicing planners is we have to really ask questions. We have to ask questions. We have to know, make and clarify right at the beginning. If somebody, the assumption I have is I will always do a good review. I'll always be thorough. But if there's any indication that somebody's saying sink this project, you need to find that out as early as you can. All right. Did Mike breach the code of ethics by calling Gemma, who works at the county? Somebody's saying yes. Tell us why you think it might have happened.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Ex parte communication.
Anybody want to comment on that? That's interesting. Ex parte planning commissioners and planners have to watch ex parte. In this particular case, Gemma is not approving the project, right? So one of the other questions to ask is, did he cause problems by going to somebody who had a interest in the project, even though they weren't approving it? Laura.
Development officer for the county, so he would have known ahead of time that she might have an interest in the outcome of the project.
He did. I think that would have been his defense. I would suggest, though, that as a planner, if you're involved in this situation and you need to talk to somebody, go further out. Go further out of that jurisdiction, because you will put yourself in the middle of a big mess. And so as planners, we have to avoid the appearance of trying to muddy the water or cause problems. I do think his defense in the skit is that he was soliciting advice from a friend. He went to grad school with her. He knew she was interested in housing. But that's a thin defense when confronted with this particular small town and pressure from the county, and the fact that Gemma is the community development officer. Kathy.
Might it not depend on what Gemma did with that information? Yeah, okay.
Okay, let's go. There's other question. If there's more than one question here, I'll just ask the one question. This is the last question. The skit mentioned both AICP Code of Ethics and the standards required when accepting federal funds, such as low-income housing tax credits. Is there a relationship between AICP Code of Ethics and fair housing, or any other acceptance of federal funds, or are they totally separate things? We hit on it just a bit ago, so.
I think there's a relationship between the AICP Code of Ethics and fair housing, because we do have to provide diversity. But I don't believe that the acceptance of other federal funds has anything to do with ethics and fair housing. So I think I see that as two separate questions.
Okay, anybody else? I would say that this is one of those things you want to keep in touch with your local ethics, your community, whoever your local government's practices are, because this could be a procurement issue, if nothing else. I mean, there's obviously a conflict with any of the AICP policies. Look on our website. There are dozens of policy stances. These are official policy stances that planners need to represent. And one, of course, is fair housing. And advocacy, even though we have a limits on how, if you're a planning commissioner, I know you can't necessarily advocate actively, but you need to keep, if you're a planner and you're involved in the, as a planning commissioner in the planning process, knowing what the planning policies are generally, it will be helpful in making sure you ask the right questions for at your hearings and workshops. Sir.
Perspective to a local responsibility as a planner or planning commission, I don't see a relationship at all. I'm a part of many national organizations that have many policy positions. There's no relationship on the work that I do. I just happen to pay dues. Help me understand the link between a national policy position and an ethics issue.
Well, that's why we have these courses, and sometimes there's not. But the policy positions that are with APA are just basically a well thought out understanding of an issue. And so fair housing is a policy. Of course, that's also national law. So our planning code does include inclusion and fair housing related to removing barriers to opportunities for affordable housing. But basically it's a legal thing. All governments who accept CDBG funds have a commitment to furthering fair housing in their communities. So that's one of the issues. Do you think this mayor will be able, you think if nothing else happens, that Gemma would look at this mayor's signature on a statement attesting that they're furthering, that he and the town of Dalton are furthering fair housing based on what she knows now? And that's one of the issues.
Really need to keep up here because we got other sessions starting. This,
Okay,
I'm
we're gonna
gonna
wrap it up.
I'm like one more, go ahead, but like, this is the last comment.
I'm just making sure that you're not saying that there could be a conflict with our ethics code and accepting federal funds in any.
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
Well, thank you all. This was a complicated session. Roxanne has something to say, but before I pass it to Roxanne, we're going to start the next sessions 10 minutes later than the agenda. So we'll start at 10:55. And they are Critical Area Commission over in the Garden and Achieving Equity in the EV Charging Reliability Act in here. And hold on, Roxanne. Where is Teresa?
I want to encourage everyone, the lunch today is not like a sit down lunch. So if you wanted to go right after the last sessions, grab a sandwich and go because they're already going to be prepared for you. So grab and go. Thank you.
I want to thank everyone from taking the time to be part of the AICP training. I put in the information, and I will follow this up with sending you information on the handouts and the information about the CM credits if you did not get it. Thank you very much, and have a great day. And look forward to meeting with you all at your local communities. Thank you again. Have a good day. Bye.
Let me